Tales from Old Ireland, Lesmore and the Fairies. There was a poor man living in the green glen of Airlow, at the foot of the Gouty Mountains, and he had a hump on his back the size of a football. Lesmore, as he was known, for he always wore a spring of the foxglove on his hat, looked as if his body had been rolled up and put on his shoulders. When he sat down, the hump was so heavy that it pushed his head all the way to his knee. The country people were shy of meeting him alone, for although he was harmless, evil folk had put out strange stories about him. Some said he was a changeling, a child of the fairies, and others said he must be in league with the devil, which was a terrible lie, for you'd have to cross 7 countries to meet a kinder man. Lesmore spent his days sitting on a stool at his cottage door, braiding rushes into hats and baskets. He was an expert at his trade, and could get more for his work than anyone else in the land. He lived on his own on the edge of the village of Apa. One morning, he was up before dawn to take his hats and baskets to the market in Cahir. He had a good day and sold everyone, but he was wearing going home, and his hump was weighing heavy on his back. It was dark by the time he reached the old mound of Knockgrafton, so although he still had a great distance to travel, poor old Lesmore sat down to rest. He was almost dropping off to sleep when what should he hear but the strangest song. Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday. That's how it went, before stopping a second or two and beginning again. Lesmore thought he'd never heard such sweet, high-pitched singing. It was like the sound of many tiny voices, all blending in with one another. And he listened carefully, scarcely drawing his breath. He looked all around to try and work out where the sound was coming from, and realized to his amazement that it couldn't be from anywhere but inside the mound. Pressing his ear to the grass, he listened even more closely to the sweet sounds. But after a while, the music, which had at first seemed so beautiful, began to bore him. Lesmore started to think it was a shame that the only thing that fairies sang was Monday, Tuesday over and over. It was as though they didn't know what was supposed to follow. So the next time they paused at the end of their round, Lesmore took up the tune himself and added a bit in the silence. Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The fairies of Knockgrafton, for they were the singers, were delighted when they heard Lesmore's addition to their tune, and listened while he sang the whole thing through. "Why didn't we think of that before?" said the king of the fairies, appearing before him. "It's perfect, and who are you that's brought us such a gift?" "I'm Lesmore," he said, in awe, for he'd never spoken to a fairy before. "And I'm very glad you liked my words. I'd be delighted to have you take them up, for you sing so beautifully." "Well, you are a great man for the music, Lesmore," said the king. "More skilled than any of us. Would you come down to meet the rest of my people? For I'm sure they'd all like to thank you for themselves." "There's nothing would give me greater pleasure," said the hunchback. He followed the king of the fairies along a dark tunnel that led into the hill, until they arrived at a magnificent palace. The fairies gave him a hearty welcome and asked him to sing the song through again. They danced around him, listening and then singing, till they were sure they had mastered it. Then they invited him to sit at the head of the table, next to the king, for they were about to have a great feast. When they had finished their banquet, Lesmore joined in the dancing until the fairy king called for a halt to the music and stepped up to him, saying, "Lesmore, Lesmore, the hump which you borne on your back is no more. Look down on the floor, Lesmore." The man looked to the ground and saw the hump tremble from his shoulders. Lesmore straightened his back for the very first time in his life, only to find he was so tall that his head scraped the ceiling of the great hall. As he looked around, the joy and the beauty made him dizzy. His eyesight grew dim, and he fell into a deep sleep. He awoke to a broad daylight. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and he found himself at the foot of the Mount of Knockgrafton, with the cows and sheep grazing all around. The first thing Lesmore did was to feel for his hump to see if he'd only been dreaming, but sure enough, it was gone. He stood up and stretched, and wasn't it wonderful to feel his back straightening and to be able to hold his head up to the sky, tall and proud. He looked himself up and down and saw a well-shaped, dapper sort of a fellow in a brand new suit that the fairies had made for him. He stepped out lightly to return to Kappa, with the new-found spring in his step. No one he met along the way recognized him, and he was hard-pressed to convince them that he was old Lesmore, the basket maker. It wasn't long before his story got out, though, and a great fuss was made of him by young and old. One morning, he was sitting constantly at the door of his cottage when an old woman came up to him, asking the way to Kepa. "Sure, you're there already," said he. "Who are you looking for?" "I've come all the way from Waterford, looking for a man called Lesmore," said she, "who I hear tell had his hump removed by the fairies. There is a son of mine has a hump also, and I want to find out the charm so he can get rid of it." "I'm the man you're after," said Lesmore, and being a good-natured fellow, he told her all that had happened. How he raised the tune for the little people, how his hump had been taken from his shoulders, and how he'd got a new suit of clothes into the bargain. The woman thanked him and hurried home to fetch her son. But Jack Madden, for that was his name, wasn't a bit like Lesmore. Nasty people take all shapes and forms, from fat to thin, from ugly to beautiful, and this particular fellow was one of the worst. The woman put her son on a cart, for he was too lazy to walk, and pushed him to Knockgrafton. The grumpy man complained every inch of the way. His mother left him sitting on the grassy mound and went off to spend the night in Cahir. Jack Madden hadn't been there long when he heard the tune coming from the fairy hill. And if Lesmore had heard sweet music, the tune Jack Madden heard was 10 times sweeter, for instead of stopping on Monday, Tuesday, it carried on round and round, and ever rounder, thanks to Lesmore's help. Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But Jack Madden had no ear for a tune. All he wanted was to get rid of his hump, and his mother had told him how to do it, so he never thought to listen to the music to see if he could improve on it. Instead, having heard the fairies sing it over 7 times without stopping, out he bawled, never hitting the tune. "Thursday and Friday!" he screeched at the top of his voice, thinking that if one day was good, 2 days were better, and he might even get an extra suit of clothes into the bargain. No sooner had the words passed his lips than he was whisked into the hill with prodigious force, and the fairies were all around him in great anger. "What's that horrible noise?" they screamed. "Who spoiled our tune?" they growled, and the Fairy King stepped up to him and said, Jack Madden, your words are so bad in the tune we feel glad in. Your life we will sadden. 2 humps for Jack Madden." And 20 of the strongest fairies came up carrying Lesmore's hump and pressed it down on Jack Madden's back, where it stayed for the rest of his days. They put Jack Madden out of their castle into the pitch-dark night, and in the morning his mother found him at the foot of the mound, with a hump twice the size it was the day before. "What happened, Jack?" she asked, but he wouldn't tell, for fear the little people might put a 3rd hump on his back. She put him in the cart and wheeled him home to Waterford. Everyone said that's the sort of thing that happens if you don't pay proper respect to the fairies. And they're right. Thank you for listening, boys and girls. This is from Your Story Fairies. Have a good night. Sweet dreams.